What's up, long players? It's the Long Play Listening Party, the show where we go deep on local music, making records, music gear, and whatever else sounds good to us. I'm Howie Howard. We have Nate on the call. Say what's up, Nate.
What's up, everybody?
And Royce Diamond.
What up?
And our special guest, Marty Hillard from the mighty Ebony Tusks. How's it going, Marty?
It's going really well. Thank you all for having me. Sure do appreciate it.
For sure. And we are here to talk about Marty and Geese and Daniel's new record, Heal Thyself. This has been a long time coming. I only introduced myself to you right before the pandemic at the White Schoolhouse show back in February, March. Mm-hmm. But I've been following Ebony Tusks for something like 10 years. I've been to several shows. I even have the Midas EP from 2011. But this is your debut record. This has been a long time coming.
That's correct, yeah. This is our first full-length album. It's something that we've been working on, I want to say, as early as 2012. In terms of writing, I don't think we earnestly sought to start tracking at least until January of 2016. But at least from like late 2012 through late 2015, we really concentrated on playing live shows and trying to make our live shows as good as it could possibly be while sort of writing material with the future in mind. So
I think, to me at least, the big question I want to ask, and we won't answer it in one shot or maybe even tonight, right? But the big question to me is, like, you developed this incredible live show, super energetic, different than anything else I've ever seen anybody do. And the record is a different beast. And I'm so curious how you think about them, being the same, being different, and how you approach kind of each one.
Sure. Well, I think we were really fortunate that by the time we entered the studio with our friend George Valier in January 2016, we were already having lots of conversations about wanting to make an album that was intentionally different from our live show. And I mean, I think even now, even as recent as our live stream last weekend, that I'm still hearing things in the music that happen live that definitely contrast with the record. I think the big thing is that we always hear ourselves and approach what we do in the live setting a little differently. And so it only made sense that we would approach how we recorded the album differently than what we do live. I certainly hope that every time the listener comes back to the album that they're hearing something different or getting a different vantage into the album based on what they're paying attention to at that point in time. I know that there's lots of albums that I will listen to and maybe the music will stand out on the front end, but then I go back and I hear the lyrics and hear how well they pair with the music and how intentional they are to the music. And it gives me a whole different feeling, gives me a different rush. And I hope that that's the kind of experience we were able to cultivate for people who listen to Heal Thyself.
Absolutely, man.
That's cool. So it was baked in from the beginning that the show and the record were going to have somewhat different approaches.
Absolutely. I think we were fortunate that we were able to have that conversation. I know that coming off of, just like the earliest part of the decade, for us, it was more one of those things where, like, Daniel I mean, like we all have history in making music, but Daniel had sort of introduced this idea of, like I have a beat, like I've got a beat, and I'd like to share it with you and for you to check it out. And while it wasn't necessarily that beat that turned me on, I did like the idea that, like, hey, like we actually could approach this project, in a unique musical way, or a way that's unique to the three of us. Prior to that, like with the Midas EP, I'd been working with different producers, and at a certain point in time, we went separate ways, and so I was trying to figure out, so like, what is the sound future of Ebony Tusks? Like, what does this look like? What does it sound like? And so that was just yet another, mildly serendipitous point in time where I think Daniel just offered something, and I thought, like, oh, this would be a good idea. Like, we should have a conversation about this. And so what that did was it really just opened us up to talking about what is it that we do want to sound like. What are some of our influences? What do we actually listen to? Because prior to that, I mean, it was more just like, existing as a live entity. But that gave us an opportunity to talk more about what we actually want to sound like.
Fresh up off the mountain and sliding toward apocalypse. Move thick like a crew of Somali occupants, staring directly at you through looted sets of binoculars. Keep ignoring it, then be forced to acknowledge it. Nodding off to a shark with a jaw full of overconfidence, huh? My whole team doing numbers. My homeboys slow creep on the come up. All day, Chuck D's on the corner. You did it, I done it. You got it, I want it, I want it. My whole team about to bubble. My homeboys Chuck D's on the corner. All day, slow creep on the come up. You did it, I done it. You got it, I want it, I want it. Wooden Jesus, peace and crosses tatted on the fingers. Hope a righteous teacher's poster and no top Adidas. There's nothing casual about this underground depleted. Das effects is hold it down a dozen times repeated. Often blended bumper crops that burst his tortured lungs. Sip of elixir set a fire to his spoken tongue. You stunk of privilege, a rival of a fortune son, but what he wouldn't give a compromise to be the chosen one. To have been born within a world from which you could evolve, and to have seen a glimpse beyond these four polluted walls, and to demand a man is conscious proving you belong, bandying about a stack of dollars you've been groomed to flaunt. You wanna gamble with them bulls where you can roll the dice? We'll serve a matador's portion with a fork and knife. Siphon off his skin and bones as if you hold the right. Believe me when I say that it appears you can't afford the price.
Royce, you have your speakers up?
I don't have them up.
Okay.
I have them on, but I can hear the music.
Gotcha.
My whole team about to bubble. My homeboys Chuck D's on the corner. All day slow creep on the come up. You did it, I done it. You got it, I want it, I want it.
So Marty, does something like this start with a beat?
I chopped it up and distorted it and made it into...
Could you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, does a song like that, does it start with a beat? Or does it start with a hook, or what does it start with?
That one did. I actually started working on the instrumental for Chuck D's back in December of 2012. My setup was largely analog for most of the last decade, honestly. And so for me, I mean, that was really just a drum machine, guitar pedals, a bass guitar that I then used like the onboard effects on my Yamaha 16 track to manipulate and like blow it out the way that it sounds, you know. So that's just like a bass chord that I'm like what that main melody is just like a bass chord that I'm playing on 2 strings, and then I looped it. So yeah, it was, you know, and that was an interesting way to work. I mean, I think it's been really interesting to hear people describe the album as minimal, because that really makes sense to me. Like, you know, minimalism makes sense to me because when one thing that I know when we were in the middle of writing was I just kept thinking of the word primitive and primitivism, and just the idea of like, you know, getting back to 1, 2, 3 instruments to be able to communicate like a much broader musical idea, you know. So that made a lot of sense to me, and I was glad that came through in a way when people listen back to it, you know, that technically it's really simple in terms of the way that we applied ourselves to the instruments, and yet it still gives like a really full sound. You know, I mean, and maybe this is corny to say, but like in the way that you think of like a rock and roll power trio.
That's exactly what it feels like. Yeah.
You know, like a Wolf Mother or a Muse, or just the fact that you can get this high volume and this high intention of sound from very few instruments. You know, and I think that that's really cool. So.
But the processing is adding all kinds of frequencies, and you got a full. You might be starting with 1 or 2 or 3 sounds, but you're ending up with this full spectrum. Sometimes it's kind of chopped up and interwoven. So yeah, you get that huge effect.
Right, absolutely. And I think there's definitely something to be said for that. I know that I can point back to 2 albums in particular that were really influential to me personally in terms of coming up with the sound for this album. So, I'm a Houston artist named Blackie, Michael LaCour, who's been around for, oh gosh, I think he put out his first tape in like 2005. But it was his tape in 2011, True Spirit and Not Giving a Fuck, where it was like one of the first, I mean, like I had heard like all these different sonic strains and influences across like lots of different music, but it was the first time I heard it put together in a package the way that he had put it together, where it's like, you know, hardcore vocals, like really shouty vocals, kind of rap, kind of not, like, you know, really powerful electronic influenced sounds. So you know, it's like it's hard to separate between, you know, is this like an analog instrument or is this something completely like made in the grid, you know. Just the fact that there was like no separation between the two, I think was like really powerful to me. And then I saw a performance that he did that same summer on YouTube, and I was really big into YouTube at the time. I think that was like, so if you're talking about sonic influences and the way that like YouTube is going to compress and crush like all these frequencies and make lo-fi things sound like twice as lo-fi, that's a huge influence. Like watching YouTube videos, watching people perform live in the room, hearing it through those speakers, into somebody's phone, through YouTube's compression stage. So, you know, so it's just like, so that means it's like it's 5 times as gnarly by the time it gets to your ears, you know. But I saw Blackie perform summer 2011, and just even the way that he performed, I mean, just everything about it was so compelling. Like he completely broke down the fourth wall. No point was he up on the stage. He was always like in the middle of the crowd with his friends. They were all grabbing the mic, shouting along with him. And of course, you know, like seeing punk bands, hardcore bands, you know, I've seen this for myself, but, you know, I think it was also really powerful to see a black man in this position too, and to see what I like about that particular album is that he's talking a lot about freedom lyrically, like in his lyrics, and just like freedom of expression and freedom of sound. And so I think for me, it was just like, you know, that kind of opened up all the possibilities for me about like what Ebony Tusks could sound like. And so then the other album was Black Pleasure by Cities of Eve, which came out in, I want to say, October 2012. He's from Memphis. I had seen him in 2011, so the same summer I saw Blackie. Spring before that, so just a season before that, I saw Cities of Eve at a festival in Denton called 3510. This club called the Andes. And it was the same kind of thing where it's just like his music, like sonically was still confrontational, but then just the way that his stage presence. And I think there was also something really interesting about that particular summer where he was just kind of on a run. Like he was playing a lot of dates, like he was going back and forth between Memphis and New York. And so I think there was also just something that was like sucking me in about like watching him just sort of emerge in this larger independent music consciousness, you know, as all that's happening. And the fact that I got to see him on that particular tour was just like, dang, you know. And I just, but again, you know, I just remember like the music just being so hostile and confrontational. He had a song that was buzzing back in the day called "Fuck Everybody Here," and it's so catchy, and it goes so hard, and it's like, you know, the melody is wonderful. It's just like that's the refrain and the hook. It's like "Fuck everybody here, fuck everybody here," you know. And he meant it though. I mean, that's really how he felt, you know. He's just a very confrontational artist. Yeah, those two albums, True Spirit and Not Giving a Fuck by Blackie, and then Black Pleasure by Cities of Eve. I think those were kind of the roadmap, honestly. And I mean, there's lots of other artists I could tell you about, but it's like those two albums are just completely enduring to me in terms of influence and really what I wanted this album to sound like. So.
And I mean, speaking of the album, we're blowing through it. We've been through. Do you call it Street?
It's gonna be Saint Something Street.
Saint Something Street. Okay, and Skylar, which people who've seen you live will recognize. I mean, that's a really catchy part of the live show, a really memorable part of the live show usually. And here we are at the end of Alpha Dog. This is Heir Apparent.
Yeah.
Which closes side one of the vinyl. Which I strongly encourage everyone to buy. That was my choice. Couldn't be happier with it.
Thank you.
Nice lyric sheet. Sit down, put the headphones on, follow along.
I love the master on the vinyl too. Even digitally, like I will opt to listen to the vinyl masters.
Oh, you did two masters?
Yeah, we did MP3 wave and vinyl, and when we got the test pressings back about a year ago, it was just like, I don't know, I couldn't believe the way that it came through. Michael T at Eureka Mastering does such a good job. He's made records for all of us in the area, and really proud of it. It had been almost 15 years since I got to work with him, so to be able to again was great. I actually owed him like $65. So before I had him master anything, I was like, dog, let me pay you back this money first, just so I can clear my conscience, and then you can start working on the album. So I think he and his partner Carmen got to have a nice dinner.
Nate.
Welcome back, Nate.
I don't know, my internet is all jacked up on my other computer. I didn't stop rolling, and I don't know what you guys did.
We're just rolling. If you want to get your cursor up at about 20 minutes, I can count you in. We're about 30 seconds away from the 20-minute mark.
differences. Flesh to vegetarians repelled by that specific stench. Long apparent air out of its depth per many witnesses. Pencil left for breakfast, having seconds till my fill is quenched. Yeah, bust it. My community left in ruins, ain't it? The narrative of 1,000 voices pursuing greatness. Self-appointed, a heart of stone and consumed with hatred. A fallen kingdom, a crown of bones in the future faded. Tell your mama you're not coming home. Hey! Get out of town the weekend.
So from the very beginning of this record, like, it just starts off, you know you're in a completely different world. At least that's the way I felt, you know? And as I journeyed through the record, it was like, I couldn't even describe how I felt sometimes. You know what I mean? It was just like I was in so many different places. So you get that a lot?
Chosen as depicted, is it not? Is it somebody's ghost? Well, is it big or is it pop?
Just talking about the energy and the vibe that it took me on, I felt like almost like how I felt when I watched The Joker for the first time. You know what I mean? Like, I just felt like I was in a completely different place. It felt very authentic. You know what I mean? I know you guys said you had an incredible, like, everything has been about the live show up until you decided to go into the studio. But I'm just curious, like, how you process that. I know you talked about your influences and stuff, but were you thinking about the way you were going to use the gear in the studio? Was it all production? Was it like, did you say I wanted to create a whole nother world that people can go live in? You know what I mean? Like, I'm totally in a totally different space when I'm listening to this record.
Absolutely, and that's a wonderful compliment. I'll tell it to you two different ways. So as far as those two particular influences, like with Blackie being from Houston and the Cities of Eve being from Memphis, something that's really powerful to me is that even though they make music that upon first hearing is very unorthodox for the cities that they're from, when you think about a city like Houston, you know, X number of millions of people there, huge swaths of the city are post-industrial. You know, they call it Chemical City for a reason. DJ Screw, you think about how pervasive his influence is even to this day on the music that's made by an artist, and even somebody as abrasive as Blackie, that bled and fed into his music and was a big influence on you know, his music as well. You know, same thing with Cities of Eve is that, you know, his music could also be abrasive, like Blackie's, like ours, but all these, you know, soul samples, all these blues samples, his music also taps back into the heritage and the history, you know, of his city's music. And so as unorthodox as these two artists might be relative to the pool of artists from their city, they're still making things that could only happen in the cities that they're from. And that's very attractive to me. I think I was really on a journey to make something that was very much a reflection of the Topeka that I grew up in, the Shawnee County that I grew up in. We moved here in 1992. Up until 2017, we did not have a homicide rate in the city of Topeka that approached anything compared to the mid 90s. So, you know, coming up, I had a lot of friends in my neighborhood, the neighborhood that Topeka and I grew up in. We had a lot of friends who were killed. There was police violence, there was gun violence, freak accidents, suicides. Stick and I know one young man who's doing life in Leavenworth behind a robbery at a liquor store where he was high on PCP. You know, I think before I graduated high school in 2001, I went to 11 funerals in my class alone. So that's just class of 2001. That doesn't include the classes before and after where we lost people. And so that's very much an influence on the album. And I think even from that period of time, I think just maybe like the helplessness of, you know, like not having reliable transportation, or, you know, having fast food service jobs, or not really having much of a direction. You know, I think that unfortunately, there's a connection between, you know, the period of time where I was 17, 18, 19, and then all of the young people that I know today that are making music and trying to create art in the city, because they're dealing with some of the same circumstances I was in terms of how many of their friends they've lost. You know, I look up, you know, every other month, one of these young people is like, you know, rest in peace, rest in power. Or even this last summer, there was a young man named Jaheim Meredith, who just graduated from Topeka West High School, who was shot and killed. Everybody knew him. My niece knew him. You know, everybody in the city knew him. He's just one of those kids that, regardless of where you went to high school, everybody knew him. So I would definitely say that, you know, in a lot of ways, you know, just death and the trauma of it is really lingering throughout this album. But then also, and I've talked about this before, back in August of 2009, when I was living in Lawrence, somebody broke into my apartment and held me at gunpoint and assaulted me. And so shortly thereafter, I hadn't been rapping for a very long time. At that point, like I was playing in bands, playing guitar and stuff, and started having all these nightmares, like these really strange dreams. And a lot of my friends who I was close to at that time, they were appearing in the dreams and they were telling me things. I remember one really vividly where I was like in an open market, like what would be like a farmer's market on a Saturday or Sunday or something. And one of my close friends at the time, she was sitting with me, but like her head was completely turned the other way. Like she was facing away from me, but I could hear her voice like telling me things. And so it's funny, Royce, like when you talk about, you know, feeling like it's a world that you step in, because if anything, what I've tried to do is bring exposure to some of what I was seeing in my head at that point in time. And I feel like, and I definitely feel like there is a connection between maybe some of the trauma that I had suffered as a young person, losing all of my friends, to feeling like I had come close to losing my own life. Because at that point in time when I was living in Lawrence, I was definitely like making an earnest effort to like cut myself off from my past. Like I was trying to literally remove myself from, you know, all the negative things that people have to say about Topeka. You know, trying to like, you know, sort of recreate my life in a different light. And unfortunately, it kind of came back to haunt me because the people who robbed me were from Topeka. So it was one of those things like where it's very much a wake-up call that, you know, you can't run from these things, that you have to confront them in a way, but also that confronting them doesn't have to necessarily be a bad thing, I guess. So yeah, very, very much a world that it wasn't even like we had a conversation about it, though. I think that was understood. And what was nice about Daniel and Geese is like that was something that I understood was really important to me as well. So as we're you know, the first few songs we tracked, Chuck D's, Alpha Dog, Skylar, I can't remember the fourth one, but I know of those three songs. Just us having a conversation about the songs, I think made it pretty clear to them, like, you know, what the goal was. So, long answer.
Nah, that was great, man.
Trying to throw some conversation at you, shorty, what you drink? That's right, I got it, about to get it understood. Not a word until you pay me. I put that on my hood, hidden licks, bending corners, everything you wish you could. It ain't no other way. Out here
Shaddy ain't the champion. Caddy on 9th hole, yo, he Maddie a mannequin. Paddy wagon fielded, daddy's dick, fatty chick, rap satty quick. Too baddie, he lost his gift.
Yeah, that was the first thing I did was I jumped off and off of Spotify because I listened to it on Spotify so I could hear it in my space. And I was just like searching, like I gotta know more. Like, where's his bio? Where's his book? You know what I mean? Like, I was just looking for all that kind of stuff online. And yeah, I could see you in a lot of places and everything, but I really wanted to like know more about you. I mean, I've never listened to a record and been like, let me Google this dude. You know what I mean? Like, that's tight.
That's awesome. That's amazing. That's a blessing. That's a blessing because it's not just, for me, it's not just my story being told. And that's one thing that Stick taught me a long time ago, was that, the importance of, preserving history, through your words. I feel a responsibility to what I write and what I choose to share with the world, which is a big part of why it took us so long to finish this album. I mean, a lot of it was just on me that there's, I give you an example, like on Heir Apparent, the last 4 bars before the chorus comes back in, my community left in ruin, ain't it? The narrative of a hollow voice in pursuit of greatness, and whom you bear my cross for me when my jewel is faded, or carry through with my doctrine when I'm presumed complacent. I was in Richmond, Virginia on vacation with my family. My wife and I both have family in Richmond, and so we were visiting her family. We were just sitting in the backyard, and my daughter was playing in the water and just kind of looking up in the trees, and those 4 bars came to me, and it's like I started weeping because it was like, not only did it take me 2 years to finish writing this song, but I'm finally being honest enough with myself to say the words I need to say to get it finished.
That's real.
And sometimes that's scary. It's scary because a lot of people just put bars down and say whatever on a song, but I'm so serious about putting so much of myself into the music that sometimes it's going to take a while. And in addition to that, I also have to get over my personal fears of, what does this tie me to? Not only historically, like not only am I referencing things that have happened in the past or, people or situations, but what does this mean for the future? I'm never worried about like somebody disseminating my lyrics or diving deeper into them or asking like, what about this, what about that? Like, that's not what scares me. I think just really internally it's like, I just know I'm obliged to what I say. Word is bond, right? I mean, and I can't absolve myself of that responsibility, even if it makes me feel uncomfortable, But yeah, there's lots of examples like that on the album where it's just like, I knew once I said it that meant something and that I have to follow through on whatever it is that, that's required of me. Yeah. When it's dormant and you do not exist, you do what you want when you pop them, but it'll cost a grip.
Better find to be held in contempt for past mistakes. Prepare to fill out an exit interview at the wait. No less indignant if I were to meet you at the gates. Bragging how I'd spend all my life a fugitive that escaped. I'm overwhelmed, but I'm lucid and condescending. Like who'd have thunk I get caught slipping paranoid in the city? I know.
Just to be sure I'm on the same page as you all, we're on gang signs, right?
I think so. I can hear it faintly, and that's okay. I could hear it in the ladder, it'd probably be too distracting. Trees watching the holding pattern and nocturnes can't evade. That's actually one of my favorite lyrics on the album. Like the second verse is being something in it, because that's another one that just took forever to conceive of and write. It just that one took a long time. We were performing the first verse for a couple of years before I finally did the second one and the hooks and all that. And then our buddy IK came on and just killed it. He's it's funny, and because I don't really think about age much, or at least like I put it to you like this: like I don't hold age against someone. Like I'm not interested in sunning people. Like I don't want to be sunned. I just feel like, especially as musicians and artists, like we're all peers. Like we, regardless of whether you started a year ago or 20 years, like we're all peers and we all get to enjoy that kinship. But one thing that really impresses me specifically about Isaiah is that here's somebody who's 10 years younger than me, born in '93, knows more about hip hop and almost anybody I know. Like his taste in like golden era and like early '90s and mid '90s hip hop is stupid, and I'm like, where did you find the time to hear all this music? And it's cool because like it comes through in the music that he makes on his own. He's very melodic. I mean, like he's bar heavy, but like he has great melodies, great singer, great stage presence. He's a real kind person, very respectful, And like I said, I don't ever think of him like, like on some kid stuff. It's just like, wow, it's so great to know somebody who loves his music and loves his culture as much as he does, Super cool just to be in his presence.
Running like a marathon on 14 inches. Christmas, distributing pocket all the interest. You better answer when they ask you what the business. Tension, pull up with a crown and get his wig split.
I'm sure the sequencing here is intentional, and kind of all the guest spots come back to back, beginning, middle of side 2. And it's occurring to me listening to it this time with you. I mean, I've listened to this record a bunch over the last few weeks.
Lamentations drawing flies.
But it's kind of almost the same spot as in the show where you might come off the stage, right? 2/3 of the way through, kind of. And it's almost, I'm seeing a parallel there to the live show.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because as far as sequence, that was something. There was definitely some compromise there. And Daniel's sequence ended up being the one that we went with. But I'm so grateful for that, because when I listen back to it, it's like, oh yeah, this absolutely makes the most sense. I think Dan is a person with exceptional taste. And sometimes, he and I aren't always going to agree on various decisions, but like somebody who I always trust is listening in ways and for things that I'm not listening to. Like we'll just be listening to music in the car. It'll just be an artist, and I might be more focused on the lyrics or the hook. He'll start like finger drumming because he's picking up a melody, or he'll start whistling because he's picking up a counter melody or some counter rhythm that I'm not even noticing. So I feel like that's like his greatest strength, is that he hears things in a way that I don't, and that's certainly to our advantage as a band, and especially to the sequence of the album. I'm so happy with what he had suggested. Yeah. Because when I listen back to it, it's just like I feel so good about it. I didn't even, usually I pick up on things like this. I didn't even realize Papa Dog and Heir Apparent were in the same key until I heard the album. And it's one of those things where, like, I don't know if Daniel intended that. And it's usually something that I would pick up on, and I can't believe I missed that. But, like, just the fact that it ended up that way, it's just like, I don't know. That's a real, like, that's a treat for me. Things like that are a treat.
Did you play live instruments on this at all?
Oh yeah. Yes. Yeah. Chuck D's had the bass guitar. Not Saint, not Skyler. Alpha Dog had an organ. What? Okay, Nate, you're gonna know this. The old guitarist from Connor had long hair.
Tom, I do know. God, man. And I feel. Tom Wagner.
Tom Wagner. That's exactly.
Yeah.
So I had like a two-tone organ that he tricked out and put a fuzz pedal in, and so that's the main organ melody in Alpha Dog.
Yeah, that's badass.
Yeah, it's fun. Played guitar on that one. Air Parent, our buddy Braille played cello, and Danny Bauer Sax played Rhodes and Moog on it. Gang Signs. That's just like MIDI keyboard at the end. Air Parent is another one of those weird ones. Like I started working on like 2011, and that was like drum machines and guitar pedals and bloodletting.
Yeah, that's I really like that song. I don't know. I like them all, and all of the rhythms and the like. Even this track here, man, like just that metallic like pulse. You know, it's not necessarily rhythmic, but it's I don't know, man. I'm totally fascinated by how that came about. Like, I'd love to know, like.
That one was so I have a Royce TR 505, a 606, and a 626. And so I was using the 626 pretty heavily at that point in time. So like that sort of like first rush that you're hearing was actually like a kick drum. So normally it would just be like a static, like boom, boom. And I don't even remember which guitar pedal that I used, but I used one of them, and kept tweaking it.
Yeah,
it gave me that rush sound. And that's a lot of like, at least for my musical contributions, that's a lot of like how I was approaching the album. But definitely different. Like even as we've been writing new stuff, I've been approaching it differently, just because like my interface is different and better instruments and easier ways to get music made. But I'll definitely say that was fun. I mean, it's fun to. That was a weird one because like also like coming off of the 16 track and into my disc recorder, the cable that I had was really rough. So until I replaced the cable, every time I mixed it down, it sounded like trash. And we were trying to get like one more, like 2 or 3 more songs done for the album, and I was like, oh yeah, I still have this. And I had since replaced my RCA cable. So then I went and got another mix down, and I was like, oh, this actually sounds like it was supposed to sound. All these years ago, like 7 years later, it's like, oh, we can actually use this for something.
Yeah.
So it's so funny because like just the way that we've made this album, I don't know if we'll ever make another full project like that again, like in terms of like bits and pieces that it's gonna lay around for years.
When I was supposed to be conscious of beacon, I was supposed to have conquered these demons. You were supposed to see God in this heathen. Most days I can't even argue with reason, but a part of me is flown away in departure for kingdom. Head down to the feet right, my head down to the feet right. Around here that's what you call that. Around here that's what you call that.
What's that? What's that? Like that. What's that instrument under this? I mean, I don't know.
Bloodletting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just a bass guitar. It was the same thing as Chuck D's, where like
See, that's awesome, man. I love that.
Thank you. Yeah, I played the bass and reversed it, and it's like what I had to do was, play it forwards, reverse it, learn how to play it in reverse, and then play it that way for it to reverse back in the.
Dude, that's so cool, man.
Wow.
Yeah.
It was fun. I was dorking around.
Man, that's super cool, though.
This is another early one. I think I started working on the instrumental for this in like 2013, and then we got in and did the piano and did the clock and studio years later. I think what was really nice too was like in the work with our buddy George, because I think he was really up for anything. So any kind of sonic references that we were giving him, even if it wasn't something he was familiar with, it's like he got committed to it really quickly. And then I think in terms of like tones and like the shapes of the sounds and stuff, like he spent a lot of time with me. Bloodletting is a great example. I mean, we did 9 mixes of this. And it was getting really painful toward the end, honestly. But he,
That's how it gets. That's how it gets, and then you're like, oh my god. At least I love the way that the end of this song, is that a glockenspiel, and then yeah.
And then the piano, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it was the same, so like with the piano is actually out of tune. So we had to spend a lot of time actually like getting it, like going a half step up at a time to get it to match the music.
Well,
yeah.
It sounds like it matches. You just said you spent a lot of time getting there, but it doesn't need to be in tune, man. It should be an out-of-tune piano there.
There was a point where we were gonna leave it leave it about a step and a half down, and and just listen to it. I was like, I just couldn't convince myself. No, just the fact that he spent so much time with this, finding the right sounds, and it was such a pleasure to. I mean, he and I have been, we've been friends for like 20 years, so it was like to be able to embark on this journey with him and have him like stay the course. I mean, there were some times where he would get it just like throw his hands up, like over a 4-year period, but just very, very proud of what we were able to do, and George is such a big part of that, helping us interpret, what's going on.
Yeah, man, you should, like we were talking about earlier, man, you should be, and it's awesome that you should be, and you put all that time into it and got it to that point, and I hope that you like I said, you deserve all of the everything positive thrown your way, man. Like
I mean, it's a great deal. Really does.
Lyrically, man, it's a good look. In my opinion, it's a good look for black male right now. You know what I mean? Like, I really dig that. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. And I think that's, and that's so important too. I mean, it's funny because, when we talk about the name, when we talk about Ebony Tusks, it's like, in a lot of ways, it's meant to be subversive. Because when you think about the way that like tusks exist naturally in the world, Ebony Tusks are man-made, they're synthetic, right? And yet there is some desire, there is some appeal to the idea of something that doesn't naturally exist in the world, like existing at all. And I think for me, it's very much from that perspective, and sort of like I was talking earlier, Royce, about reconciliation, like this idea of reconciling myself to my past and to my peers that I grew up with, and to all of these negative circumstances. Instead of running away, an album like this is my opportunity to confront that and to really speak to that. If we're talking about a song like Skylar, the first verse really happened. I mean, I really was 10, half a block from my parents' house, standing in front of a grocery store with 4 squad cars and 7 police officers. And my dad standing next to me, furious. Like, there's my
Body, blood, and bullet, ill-advised to be so desperate. Came into the world allergic to the counterfeit. Quarter water pocket lint. Obstacles to profit make a youngin' switch his countenance. Beggar flipped a monstrous. Doubt from unbelievers. Strongest faith I'm moving mountains with. Clouds above unsettled dust arouse the ghosts in Exodus. Inadvertent conjuring the ground awoke to self-destruct. Onward to oblivion, a march of poison animus. Man confronting self, you've not the courage nor the stamina. Abandoned ship at Antioch, we plunged to deaths when given room. Dove from off the high board to a shark-infested swimming pool. Signatures and dotted lines. Bloodlust over principles. Wouldn't waste the ink, but I'ma show you what this pen'll do. Sword of truth forever sharp, hostile in assemblage. Love to point some fingers like you haven't lost appendages. Carpal tunnel grip by broken arms and cloak the evidence while pondering the future, having not foregone apprenticeship. Metalsmith, smitten by the hammer, chose to forge the blade, watchful of the temperature and how it would destroy.
I think we all are trying to process it. You know what I mean?
Over an open flame, generations forward.
Yeah.
That's the beauty, like you were saying earlier, like being able to see black men in different roles, man. Like I remember growing up watching movies and shit, and it's like everybody had to be some version of Ice Cube, you know what I mean, or you didn't get a part, you know what I mean, whether it was a comedy or whatever. And just that's one thing I'm really thankful to with the younger generations. I see a lot more of that, you know.
Absolutely. I think that's really powerful.
Broken bread with blessed coven, squad composed of heretics, lucid shamans, wandering spirits, and sober derelicts. Body, blood, and bullet, ill-advised to be so desperate. Fear of missing out like you about this war and pestilence. Chefing from a haunted kitchen, summon of the dinner bell. Glad to be of service if you want specific personnel. Farm and table offerings, sommelier and infidel. Underpaid and overworked to demonstrate we live in hell. Above it, here below, it's levels to the drudgery. Callous from ceramics, napkins enveloping cutlery. Cursing under breath of special guests and their accompanied. Never worked a shift where you were not impaired and stumbling. Self-medicate when feeling minuscule and try to fill the void with other broken individuals. Estimates for disrepair, no specialist to take it to. Please don't shoot the messenger. I'm sorry, I don't make the rules.
I'll tell you one thing too that I always said, especially at the beginning of this project, when we were starting to embark on Stranger Sounds, I would always tell people, it was like, you might not get it, but like your little brother and sisters are gonna love this. Like I was like, we're about to step into a future where these kids, like everybody just listens to everything and that's it.
Yeah, for sure.
I always knew that and believe that, it's like, I don't consider myself like I don't keep up. Like I'm not always like watching music trends, and I'm not like,
right.
Like I'm not making like, projections. Like I'm not like a big music historian like that, but I just knew in my heart of hearts that, younger people are going to confront a world where they're just going to be inundated with lots more different types of music and lots more different types of culture. I mean, it's like, think about something like K-pop. Think about how pervasive K-pop is in 2020, and even like from 2015, how that still would have been like such a niche audience in America, at least. You know, think about a rapper like Rich Brian from Indonesia coming up on the internet, and all of a sudden, you know, 3 or 4 years later, he has like this huge international audience. You know, I think it's really important. I also think it's really good. Like, I'm super excited always for the future of, you know, where music and culture are going, especially through the lens of younger and younger generations, because I think they're just open to so much more. It's way more open. And that's a blessing. You know, I think it'll just be fun. I mean, in some ways, it's like I care very much about like traditions. You know, obviously, like, you know, through hip hop, I mean, it's a lot of things that, you know, like, you know, we had like skits and interludes and all, you know, stuff on the album that very much tie us to the traditions of hip hop, right? And so I care about traditions, but it's like, you know, I also care about the idea that like somebody's gonna come along and just open up the next thing, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I tell you, one of the best things about doing this is that we're able to get 4 people to sit down and listen to music and just talk. You know what I mean? Like, I don't get to do this other than doing this, you know?
Same here, man. It's nice to have to be able to do it in a way that is. I mean, it's just you experiencing it with other people, and despite being, you know, over the internet, it's still a social experience, and it's also getting to kind of. I mean, I think we said it earlier, Royce. The cool thing was just being able to talk to other musicians and hear about just how it came about.
Yeah.
I've been surprised by the strength of the connection and the depths that we can kind of go to in this format. And I don't know, like when we did the first one, I sort of thought it would work, but I didn't expect how fun it would be, or how emotionally real it would be. And there's something maybe about, I don't know why exactly, but maybe it's something about, you know, I think pre-COVID, it'd be hard to say like, hey, come over, we're going to put on a record, and we're mostly like maybe not going to talk through all of it. Like, we're going to listen to it together in a room. I didn't do that with anyone. It does sound fun, but it sounds hard to talk someone into. And so you know, one little silver lining of all this is that, you know, we have the technology and you know, we've sort of
I've
done
heard
the
of
experiment.
album listening parties, and I think I actually attended a Coldplay CD listening party for I think, is it like XY or something? Like, yeah. I don't know if I should be ashamed to admit that or not. I did at a bar, you know, and everybody listened to this record. And,
That's what's up, man.
But this is something new and different, and it's been really fun.
Coldplay's one of my favorite bands, honestly. I mean, they have
Oh, okay, good.
beautifully produced albums. And so what I'll say is, like, they definitely have some songs that are duds, right?
Right.
But
man, some of the acoustic stuff they did earlier, and I admit I haven't really listened to a lot of the newer stuff, but and I'm not trying to be a Coldplay stan right now, but I just I think a lot of the acoustic stuff that they did really early, and then like Up to Yellow, and then I think is an XNY or
I think X and Y. That was the third one, right?
Yeah, I think
it was. I'll be a Coldplay stan. Yes, it was the third album.
Awesome. See, I'm glad I have Marty in my corner right now.
Be ashamed. I mean, I put on a couple of songs from Ghost Stories at Harbor Lights one night when I was working shift. Joshua, one of our customers came in. He was just like, yeah, they know all the tricks. Like they get you with blah blah blah, and I just like started singing Coldplay at him. I was just like, I don't care. Like I'm trapped.
There's stuff like parachutes, man. Like I don't know. I listen to that stuff a lot.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Honestly, like I like when Everyday Life came out a year ago, I remember like driving in my car listening to it, just like, damn, like they still
Hey man. Just being honest right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm in a safe space with y'all. Come on.
Exactly. I'll tell you one thing, and that's one thing that's super cool about, at least with Daniel and Geese, is that we have been able to have like some really honest conversations, like about, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say about genre, but just a willingness to sort of break the wall of genre down when we're talking about like not only our own music, but what we listen to. Like there's just such a willingness between the three of us to actually share and actively listen to music that we all like individually.
Totally.
You don't always have that, like, even among the best of friends or bandmates. I've played in plenty of bands where my bandmates would feel like weird about sharing, like some country western or some bluegrass, even though I like those genres. Or if I would sit with them and try to share them something, it's just not, it's not a kind enough space to like, be exposing people to new music. And so one thing I'm grateful with Daniel and Geese is we've got a lot of hours on the road, listening to all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
And doing it silently and respectfully, and like just being kind to one another. It's like nothing's off limits. Like and thankfully, I think like we also, there's a lot of music that we do mutually like. So yeah.
Well, this record I think is, and I think other people have said it too. It's unlike anything I can really think or compare it to. Like sonically, it gives you a lot of like aggression, but like there's a couple tracks that bring it down, but it's like somehow it's still like it gets to that like level of intensity in it, and I can't really say that it's something I can compare it to, and I guess you don't seem to draw like from like a definable influence.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I guess the cool part too is that outside of like some of the more obscure influences that we were talking about earlier, I would say for me, just from a historical context, I feel really fortunate that like I can listen to the album and think about the album as like, mid-career Beastie Boys, or the first two Rage albums, self-titled and Evil Empire, or I could think about an album like Deftones' White Pony, or for me, like, I remember the first time I heard The Fragile by 9 Inch Nails. So I think in terms of like, bigger, broader, or like a Saul Williams, like the album that Trent Reznor and Saul Williams did, 2007, Niggy Tardust. It's like I can think back to all these moments where like I heard these albums for the first time, think about how they affected me, and think about like just from historical context and ambition, like if we ever hope to make a record that is a is affecting, then let it be as affecting as, you know, this Beastie Boys record or this Run DMC record that I heard when I was young, or, you know, some of these Wu-Tang albums. Capadonna's The Pillage is a great example for me. That's my favorite Wu-Tang album, like so underrated, and just the lyrical gifts and the production. It's just like, I can think back to all these albums that I think have like cultural significance, like for everybody, but then also think about my own relationship to those albums and say to myself, I want to make an album that resonates this way. And, you know, so that goes from like more obscure influences to some of these, you know, major label mainstream influences, you know, and hopefully maybe that's the piece of it that resonates with people in terms of like, you know, like a fun influence is like, we hope that in some way we made you feel the way these albums made us feel when we heard them. You know, if anything, like that's the transference that we're trying to be a conduit for this moment, this influence, this feeling. And I'm kind of, you know, honestly, like I'm really feeling pretty good about like some of the new stuff, and I feel like that will, you know, like the prettier parts will be even prettier. Will be even heavier. That's like the easiest way to say it, but it's like I hope that we can always create like a duality and a contrast like that in the music that we make, because it's important.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you said that you wanted it to be something that people would listen back to, you know, over and over again, and be able to find something different or something new, and I think just having listened to it a handful of times, you know, before this show and then through this show, it's just compelling, man. It makes you, at least it feels like it makes me engage with it. Like there's some music which is completely fine to be able to put on and maybe do something else, you know, while it's in the background and enjoy it that way, but still be able to, you know, listen to it deeper at another point. But I think like for this one, if I put it on, like I'm kind of forced to pay attention to something. This is how it feels, you know what I mean? So that I think that in terms of like engaging listeners, I think, man, you knocked it out of the park.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's funny because if there's any piece of the live experience that we were trying to get into the album, it was that and that alone. Because in a lot of ways, even though our live show has transformed over the last 5 years, I think that's always been at the center, is that at some level you have to engage with it. Like if you're sharing space with us, we're not going to leave you behind no matter what. Because otherwise, what's the point?
Well, yeah, even in the quieter moments, it's drawing you into something. It feels like you're being led somewhere.
Right. Absolutely. And that's just, I think that's important. I mean, you know, and you know, I'm lately, like as I've gotten older, I've gotten less afraid of like being corny and cliches, like when people say like, you know, it's like you leave it all on the field, or this might be your last. I'm starting to like understand that and embrace that wholeheartedly. Like the idea that 10 years later, we could still play shows, we could still perform at a high level. I'm diabetic, you know, I'm type 2 diabetic, and it's something where, you know, my illness is increasingly complicated as I get older. And it's something that I can't just ignore. There was definitely a period of time where Geese was going through some physical ailments that he wasn't really getting any concrete answers from his family doctor, and that was scary. You know, he's losing a lot of weight, and we worried about him. And, just the fact that we all still choose to live in the area, that, we all have room to embark on what our individual lives require and still get to be in a band 10 years later. I mean, I told Aaron Rhodes at the pitch this, I was like, none of this has to happen. I mean, on paper, like, there's no reason for us to still be together, have gone through. It's like the time just to finish this album, But I feel really grateful and fortunate every time that we're able to get together. And the fact that we all still, and we talk about this, we all still feel like we have more to give and more to do and more to say. And it doesn't have to be that way. Nothing does. Nothing does. And I refuse to take that for granted anymore, So
I believe that you do. I think what I love about both the shows and the record in their different ways is that you do something with both. It's very important to me as an artist, which is that you say something together. The three of you say something that only you can say. No one else can do what you do. No one else can say the things that you say. No one else can reflect your community the way that you do, can invite other people in to share some piece of that. And I think that's every artist's job, is to do something specific to who we each are as an artist. And the record is just suffused with that. It's crazy.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, I think we owe it to ourselves as artists. And I know that, with that said, that not every artist is motivated by the same things. Not every artist has the same goals. Not every artist is trying to communicate the same ideals or even bring themselves into it. And I think that there's great art to be found in that as well. And yet, I know for a fact that we shouldn't have any other choice. I mean, I just don't. There was really no other way around it for us but to really put ourselves into it, especially like once we got started. I mean, like what you read a song like Alpha Dog, I mean, that's another true story. That's growing up in Kentucky and Tennessee in the early 90s in a military family. And it's like, once you write songs like that, I don't know, like nothing else will do. And I can talk about this as an influence as well. I mean, a big part of, my upbringing in music and some of the early stuff that I was into, like I was in post-hardcore bands and emo bands. And I think it was cool, 20 years ago to feel like you got a project that gave you the space to like talk really earnestly about your feelings, But I think for us, what was really nice is that we could take that influence and translate it back into, let's talk about what we see happening around us. Like, let's not make it about us. A lot of bands at the time, a lot of bands now, talk solely about themselves, their own experiences, their own perspective. And for us, it was like we could take that same intensity, that same energy, and really pour it into things that matter to us and hopefully matter to other people, which is, community. So I would say that was a big influence that really, Thursday was one of my favorite bands 20 years ago. And I was talking about Cities of Eve earlier. I got to see the two of them on tour like back in 2018 at Record Bar. And so just for me, it's like two worlds colliding, this band that I listened to in high school, this artist I listened to in my late 20s that definitely is a big influence on my doing the stage together was like, it was a pretty great moment. But anyway, I say all that to say, like, I think that's what kind of opened the door for us to be a little bit more free, like, especially like infusing, hip hop tradition and hip hop culture which is also, rich with its own like storytelling history. I mean, some of my favorite rappers are the best storytellers, like Ahmad, who did back in the day. Back in the days, when but he had, 25 years fast forward. I mean, he has an incredible catalog of, really cool, like live jazzy hip hop and just really confessional music. Exhibit was one of my favorite rappers back in like 96, and I don't think anybody would ever call him like, like a wordsmith, but he is just, but he's an incredible storyteller, like just completely gifted MC. And just in the same way that like, nobody can do what he does. That's Exhibit. He's one of those artists like nobody can interpret the West Coast and bark on a track like he does. Like, and he's a funny guy. Like, so it's, so it's like I can think about that like within hip hop culture and outside of hip hop culture, just like storytellers is really what we're, really influenced by, like somebody who can tell stories in a way that's earnest and that pull people in. And that makes a big difference, I think. I feel like I'm talking a lot.
No, this has been fantastic, and I feel like we could go on for a lot longer, but we probably should ask if final thoughts on Ebony Tusks, Heal Thyself. Royce, we haven't heard from you in a minute. What do you want to leave us with? Anything?
This is definitely a great record, and this conversation, I think, really illustrates what you can experience on this record. You know what I mean? Like, just a genuine person doing genuine things the way they do it. It's a unique experience. It really is. Like I said before we even got on, like when it first came on, I was like checking my system, like to figure out like what's going on, what's happening. Like it was dope, man. It was really, really dope, and it was definitely an experience and an emotional one. So great job for sure.
Royce, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I really do.
Nate, you got anything?
I mean, I would be repeating myself, and I don't. But like I said, it's something that, man, it's just it makes you listen to it. I think there's so much just lyrical content and stuff. I mean, the musical content is I love it. I love the way that's done, and I love the way that it sports how the lyrics are. But at the same time, like it like to really dive into the lyrics if you want to, you can. And I think like just be able to go back to it time and time again, and know that you're probably going to hear something different, or something you didn't hear before is awesome, and just well done, man. Like I feel, like I said, honored and grateful that we were able to listen to the record with you and have a conversation with you about
absolutely
how it came about and how part of how you made it, all that stuff, man. It's appreciate it.
Likewise. No, thank you for having me, and thank you for that remix, by the way.
Oh yeah, that was fun, man. I hope we get to do another one or two of those.
Yeah, I appreciate all the colors that you always bring to everything that you do, and especially to that remix. Yeah, it made it float. It made it float really nicely. We were all. It was cool because I was excited, but then when I took it to Daniel and Geese, they were just like, "Yeah."
Awesome. I appreciate it, man. That's a big thank you. I mean, of course, Sean, man. Like me and him, like he sends me stuff, and like it just seems like everything just flows like right on through, like so.
That's exactly how it felt. it felt like it flowed really nicely, and thank you. It was great.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Marty, I mean, just seconding what Nate said, I'm grateful for your time. My love for this album is well known at this point, but being able to talk with you about it and hear some of the inspiration and some of the thoughts behind it and stuff, I'm going to think about things you said tonight every time I hear the record from now on. And it just makes it deeper. Yeah. And that's very, very cool. So I appreciate you and appreciate your vulnerability and your time and your willingness to talk with us.
Of course.
No doubt.
It's my pleasure. And thank you for providing this platform. I mean, I think the reality, like you had said, like prior to COVID, is that, I'm certainly a person that I spend a lot of time with music, but I spend a lot of time with it alone. Because I sort of learned through my own traumas of listening with other people is that, that not every environment, not every space is conducive to listen to music or share conversations about it. So just the fact that the three of you provide a space like this for artists, it's so important because I, at this point, I'm 37 now. At this point, I mean, I know more artists like that than I know the opposite. I think a lot of us, music becomes a more solitary experience as you get older. Mm-hmm. So just the fact that you all create this space, I'm really grateful. It's rare for me, and it really means a lot.
That's what's up.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, man. We've got more coming soon, and this will be the show that officially launches our YouTube channel, our Instagram account, the podcast feed. So wherever you're checking out the show, please subscribe, please share it with your friends, and we will be back at you with more very soon.
Awesome. Thank y'all.